Could your coach be suspended for 6 games for taking a player in the spring as a transfer? Will college football season turn week 0 into week 1? Plus, could a soccer-style loan-out program work in college football? All in today's College Football Enquirer. This is the College Football Enquirer with Ross Dellenger. I am Andy Staples. Steve Godfrey is joining a little bit later in the show. But, Ross Dellenger, you are in Indianapolis right now. NFL Combine going on, but it's not just NFL stuff. There are tons of college football news is happening all in and around you.
Yeah, that's right. I don't only come every year. I try to come to Indy for the Combine and see the agent coach side, but also at the same time, there are tons of NCAA college school administrators here. The NCAA Football Rules Committee and the NCAA Football Oversight meets, and they made some big news this week, bigger news than I even anticipated. We knew that the targeting rule would be changed. We sort of knew that was coming from the Rules Committee. What I didn't know was that the Football Oversight Committee was actually going to make some decisions, in fairly significant and interesting decisions on not just the calendar, but a specific transfer policy. So I'll go all the way. Well, let's get the targeting out of the way first, and that'll be probably by the time that this podcast airs.
This can affect
you'll have
the games you watch this season.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and by the time you listen to this podcast, there will be an NCAA announcement probably of this. But the NCAA Rules Committee has decided to recommend an elimination of the carryover suspension that comes with a targeting violation for first-time offenders during the season. So we all know that the current rule is that if you are flagged for targeting the second half of a game, you have to sit out the first half of the next game. That's what's eliminated. The first half of the next game, now you can play in the next game if you're a first offender. But while they sort of weakened, in a way, that penalty, they strengthened if you're a second-time offender. And that gets a little complicated, but I think it will be released by the time this podcast comes over, but they strengthened that. So that's the targeting piece of this, which obviously I think somebody on the committee mentioned to me that there's only been 5, last year there was only 5 players who were penalized for targeting a second time in a season. So this really affects the first-time offenders. They will not be penalized in the first half of the next game. They won't have that suspension. So the Football Oversight, they did a lot of very interesting things. We know, Andy, that we have no spring portal, transfer portal in football. We have one portal this year in January, but there was a sense that many players would use and schools would use the, quote, blind transfer this spring, where a player just unenrolls and then enrolls at a school and then joins the football team, that way sort of skirting the rules in a way of transferring outside of the portal window. Well, the Football Oversight had an idea on how to deter schools, coaches, and players from doing that. They have recommended a pretty stiff penalty on coaches and on schools who accept a transfer outside of the window, outside of the transfer portal window. And those penalties are as severe of any penalties I've ever seen the NCAA oversight come up with. So number one, the head coach would basically be suspended for half of the season, including practices and team activities. It's pretty crazy. And then number two, you'd be fined 20% of a football team's budget. Whatever your football team, your school budget is, you'd be fined 20%, and then you'd have your roster spots reduced by 5. So that's all if you accept a transfer outside of the portal window, such as this spring. I'll stop there, Andy, and we can get to the calendar stuff after we have a little conversation about this. But this transfer policy rule is certainly a significant thing, and one that I am sure will face legal scrutiny.
Yes. So I tweeted when you tweeted this out, I said the sound you are hearing is the collective knuckles of every antitrust attorney in America cracking all at once because they're about to start typing. They haven't even picked their clients yet, but they've already started typing because this is collusion. This is a group of competitors conspiring to limit the ability of non-employee students to move from one university to another to seek a better opportunity for themselves. And there's your pickle right there, because I get what they're trying to do, where if you put the onus on the coach and if you put the onus on the athletic department that would be taking the player, you're saying, well, the student's not penalized, so they're not going to sue us. Yes, they are. They will still sue you. The other people who will sue you are the coaches, because if you try to suspend a coach for a half of the year, they're going to sue you, and they're probably going to win, because they're going to say, well, you only did this to keep this entire labor market frozen. So I get where they're coming from, but it's one of those things, like, until they really come to grips with reality that the only way they can have real rules about this stuff is negotiate it with the players, they're going to keep banging their head against this wall. It's like, it in theory, it should work, because if I'm a coach, I'm scared to death of 6-game suspension.
Yeah.
But I'm also probably going to consult attorneys of various stripes and be like, hey, if I did this, I can get an injunction, right? I don't have to actually serve that suspension.
Yeah. Right. Well, think about it, Andy. I think we've mentioned it on the show. You know, during spring practice, there's inevitable injuries. There's injuries over the summer as well. There's injuries now during winter workouts and all that stuff. So if you have a key player, such as a quarterback or a starting left tackle or something, get injured, if you're a coach, you're going to want to go out and try to get a kid to blind transfer in outside of the portal. And now you risk, number one, getting, facing these penalties, but number two, having, a judge take too long to rule. Now, a judge, you'd be requesting, like all these eligibility cases, a preliminary injunction to let you coach.
Right. Which would happen in the spring and summer.
Which would probably happen. Yeah, right. So we'll see how schools sort of handle this. If the past is any guide, the schools will sue, as you're talking about, and they will sue. Yeah. But this is clearly a deterrent in, and it also, it isn't finalized. It has to go through sort of a socialization review process, and then the D1 Division I cabinet will make the decision. One thing I want to note, it continues to get sort of misinterpreted in every story I feel like I write with the NCAA in there. This was not an NCAA staff decision. This was the NCAA Football Oversight Committee, which is made up of school administrators, athletic directors, and coaches at schools, and they made this decision. So it's not like the NCAA staff. Now, the NCAA staff may have sort of given it the thumbs up or a blessing, but they don't have as much control over this. This is controlled by the committee. So just to be clear on that. And so maybe segueing over to the calendar stuff, which wasn't announced.
Let's hold off on the calendar, because we got to talk about that too, because it ties into something we were talking about the other day. But I want to talk a little more about what you just said, because like you said, this is not final. This is not, if you take somebody in the spring, your coach is going to be suspended for 6 games right now. They do have to go through several layers of approval. And I feel like this is one where they had a little no bad ideas session, a little blue sky thinking session. And I would imagine that they're probably, like, the general counsel of the NCAA may want to step in and say, guys, you're going to make my life a lot harder if you do this.
Yeah. And that's honestly, Andy, that over in the past, that has usually happened, right? I mean, there's been plenty of things that the schools, I think, and these committees made up of the school administrators have wanted to do, and NCAA legal has sort of said, you can't do that. It's not legally defensible. I think we're getting to a point where frustration is so high among school administrators, they sort of just don't care anymore. They want, their coaches want rules. They want rules. They're trying to establish some kind of rule and framework despite not having a collective bargaining agreement or federal legislation that gives them the legal protection. And so they don't have legal protection. And despite that, they're trying their best to sort of make rules and regulations. And it's just really hard, as we've discussed, because of the legal challenges presented by the schools themselves that make these rules.
Right, exactly. They make the rules, but they don't always agree with each other. These are not unanimous votes.
True.
And if you have a few schools that don't agree and that are going to sue to blow it all up, it will never hold. It will. And this is, we've talked about this among, with the NCAA itself, with the conferences themselves, because the second the schools are the ones suing the people who actually make the rules themselves, you got nothing. And this is what you said. The coaches, the ADs, the people on the ground, they are fed up. They're done. They just want rules. They don't care particularly how it happens. And I think that's the issue, is it has to happen a certain way to be legal. And that's the problem. Now, there is one thing that these guys can do to manage player movements, probably the better word. And there was another story that came out on Wednesday about that. And it was a school doing the thing it has to do. So only about an hour and 15 minutes from where you are now, Cincinnati sues Brendan Sorsby, their former quarterback, who's now at Texas Tech, because they're claiming he owes a $1 million buyout. And if you read the complaint, it's got the relevant passage from the contract that says if you leave between the 25 and 26 seasons, you owe $1 million. That's the amount of liquidated damages we've calculated. And Brendan Sorsby's agent has told them no, he's not going to pay it. They released a statement to The Athletic, said this is an unfairly punitive amount, which in buyout world and non-compete world, the court can say, oh, this doesn't represent actual damages. This is just to punish the person, and they'll invalidate it. So they're going to fight over this. But Ross, I think Cincinnati has to do this. I wrote a comment on 3 about it this morning. They have to fight for every penny, and every school that gets in this situation has to fight for every penny, because right now, the only thing they have that actually works is good old-fashioned contract law. Yeah.
That's exactly right. We saw that play out during the portal with Devon Williams was the best public example. But as I've said on the pod, and as you know, I know, Andy, there were dozens of players who wanted to leave and didn't get to the point that it became public, and they ended up not leaving because of the contract constraints and the legal issues with the contract. So you're right. Like, aside from this rule that the NCAA football oversight created, the one deterrent, or the one thing preventing some kind of spring movement in portal are these contracts, these rev share contracts. And there still seems to be doubt from some that they are enforceable. But we're certainly going to, at some point, a judge is going to rule, whether it's in this case or we've got a case with Georgia, right? Suing a former defensive lineman, who left for Missouri. We've got a Wisconsin, and this is a little bit of a different case, not for a buyout, but a Wisconsin player moving to Miami, and Wisconsin suing Miami over torturous interference of a contract. So we've got like 4 or 5 different lawsuits over these contracts. And at some point, we're going to have a ruling. I think the Wisconsin case, which is over a year old, discovery starts pretty soon.
Yeah, and that one's more about Miami tampering with Xavier Lucas.
Yeah.
The interesting part about the Xavier Lucas case is the Big Ten, which writes, the conference office writes all the Big Ten rev share agreements for all their schools. They're the only conference that does that right now. And after the Xavier Lucas thing happened, they went back and looked at their document and they said, okay, here's where they got us on this one, and we're going to strengthen this thing. And so the one they have now has a little more teeth, and that is why Devon Williams is still at Washington, or one of the reasons. I had Jed Fish on my On 3 show, and he said, of course, obviously it's because there's a lot of good players coming back, and he had a great year last year. He can be really good. It's true. But he had somebody in his ear telling him, hey, if you go to LSU, you're going to make a lot of money. And then when the reality of it hit, of how much you would owe Washington, it's like, oh, I wouldn't make that much money. So I'm going to stay at Washington. And
Right.
so this will be interesting because Sorsby reported $5 to $6 million in his package at Texas Tech. From what I'm told, Texas Tech knew about the buyout. The Big 12 office knew about the buyout. The amount paid to Sorsby was basically assuming him having to pay that buyout.
He'll pay the buyout, right?
I will say this.
Yeah.
I will say this though, Ross.
Hmm.
If I was his agent, and this is why I could never be a sports agent because I don't think this way, but it made perfect sense when I thought about it. If I was his agent, I would definitely tell him not to pay. Because what if Cincinnati doesn't go after it? You just saved your client $1 million. What if they go to the table and they negotiate back and forth, and all of a sudden Cincinnati says, okay, we are willing to take $700,000. You just saved your client $300,000 of real money. Like, so it's in the agent's best interest to fight it like this, but it's every school needs to fight for every penny on this, because I don't know about you. Help me with this, Ross. I think if they win most of these, then it just becomes standard procedure, like when a coach moves.
Yeah, you absolutely. If even if maybe one judge sort of sets precedent and rules in however way that these rev share agreements are like legally binding, then the thought is that you would have a situation where players would just know that they have to pay, just like, as you said, just like coaches. That's sort of the thought. And I think I think what we're going to see too going forward, you mentioned the Big 12's uniform revenue share agreement, which has been sort of heralded as like the standard, sort of a gold standard. I think you will see other leagues also create uniform agreements for all their schools, and then support their schools like the Big Ten sort of has in these agreements, in these legal fights. I think you'll sort of see that. Did I say Big 12?
Yeah, you did say Big 12, but you did correct yourself on Big 10, and the Big 10 corrected itself. So let's remember that this is all a work in progress. Like the Xavier Lucas one did not protect them, and you notice like Wisconsin's not going after Xavier Lucas; they're going after Miami. If Washington had like, let's say DeMond Williams had gone to the portal and moved, Washington would have gone after DeMond Williams, and that's the way the contract is written now. You could do that. So that's, I know everybody thinks I'm never in favor of the schools in these situations. I am in this one. This is there's a contract. Everybody signed it. Everybody agreed to it, and you can't just not pay what you're supposed to pay. So
but
it's pretty. Seems pretty simple.
Yeah, for sure. Right, for sure. And again, if the idea, look, there's been a lot made of issues in the House settlement and all this rev share stuff. We talked about the issues with people going over the cap and all this tampering going on. The House settlement has not brought the stability that most thought it would. In this case, with this issue with these rev share contracts, it can bring stability in a way for movement if the schools fight, and then in a court of law if the judge deems these as legally binding. So I think every school in America, Andy, is certainly rooting for Cincinnati to continue to fight and win this case.
Yeah, and they're in first-year law school stuff, not third-year law school stuff now. So that it's something everybody can understand at this point instead of the antitrust stuff. So, Ross, you mentioned the calendar. I think the people in charge are listening to the show based on what we heard. When we come back, we'll talk about potential changes to the college football calendar that sound an awful lot like some of the ones we mentioned the other day. We'll be right back. We are back at the College Football Enquirer, and the other big piece of news out of Indianapolis, and Ross is there. The NFL Combine's going on. Everybody there is like, did you talk to the Jets? Have you talked to the Chiefs? To all the guys who are about to get drafted. Yes, unless you're a top 5 pick, they've talked to everyone. Don't you worry about that, guys. But more important to our universe of college football, they've been talking calendar and scheduling, and it really feels like they've been listening to the show, because some of the ideas that have come out of this make an awful lot of sense, Ross.
They do, yeah. They and I'll note that um, the football oversight's transfer policy rule that we discussed about in the opener, that's sort of been announced by the NCAA and is on a little more of a fast track. These other calendar things, probably a little slower. They weren't announced, but they were discussed and for the most part settled on, I think, in the committee room, but they're not as finalized. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So number one is, at least for now, keeping the portal in January. There was sort of a fight on, again, like the similar fight that played out last year of potentially moving the portal to February, or to March or April. There was actually a suggestion of February, but that got sort of quickly dismissed. But so keeping the portal in January, number one. Number two, giving coaches the flexibility to move some of their spring practices to the summer. The AFCA proposal is probably similar, from what I understand, to the concept of the AFCA, that Coaches Association presented last year, where you basically, a coach gets his 15 spring practices plus 6 sort of OTAs. I can't remember if they're padless or not. I think they are padless practices. And so that's 21 total. And you can spread those over several months into the summer. You can kind of split them up. And the idea is coaches who some don't want to have really a traditional spring practice anymore can move to more of a June style, like NFL OTA. And then the third thing, perhaps the biggest, is allowing schools, starting with the 2027 season, so not this year, to open the season on week 0. So eliminating the waiver process that comes at week 0. Usually you had anywhere from probably 6 to 10 FBS games or so on depending on the year. On week 0, you had to get a waiver to play on week 0 or play Hawaii, right? If you played Hawaii, you got an automatic exemption. And so now they're talking about just eliminating that waiver process and giving everybody an assured 2 bye weeks every year. Right now, Andy, as you know, depends on the season, the calendar. If you have 1 bye week or 2 right now, and now if you move to week 0, make week 0 week 1, then everybody will have 2 bye weeks assured every year.
I like this for a lot of reasons. The moving week 1 to week 0, and that's what it would be. The second you do that, it's not like a few teams would sign up for this. Everybody would start that week. It gives you 2 weeks alone before the NFL regular season starts, and the NFL preseason gets worse and worse every year, the way as they keep trying to add regular season games. So like, you are going to be all alone with games that count to hook the fans in before the NFL even starts. So that I like that. You're getting people when they are at their most rabid wanting football back. And so that's awesome. And it's not just because the week 0 games have been whoever goes to play in Ireland and then whoever plays against Hawaii playing somebody else. If you saw, USC finally replaced Notre Dame on its schedule officially on Wednesday, and that was with San Jose State, and they're playing it week 0 because San Jose State has to play Hawaii. So they don't need a waiver for that. And that makes so much sense. The OTA thing makes so much, like, you're paying these guys anyway. You're paying the players. Like, before, they were always saying, well, since they're not getting paid, you can't require them to be here all the time. Yeah, you're paying them now. Require them to be there all you want. Require them to practice all you want. It's not that big of a deal, especially, I'm telling you, from a player's perspective, in the middle of the summer, to have a practice in shells versus what they're going to normally make you do in the weight room or on the field running, like, it's better. So I think that would be good. It'll make for sharper, because you're starting a week earlier. And I'm assuming preseason practice starts a week earlier, but you're getting more on-field reps. The game should be cleaner earlier in the season. You shouldn't need as much time for teams to coalesce. I like it all. I really do. And the interesting thing about it, Ross, with the week 0 part, is I do think there are people, like we played the clip from Joey McGuire the other day, the Texas Tech coach. I think there's several coaches and lots of administrators who would like to shift the calendar all the way, not just the start of the season, but shift the end of the season. And I'm telling you, the drumbeat for that will be very loud next year as the playoff is going on. As you go through a playoff where there's a massive gap between the semifinal or between the quarterfinals and the semifinals, they're not finishing till the 25th. Everybody's going to be ready to figure something out, and this is the first step toward the solution to that.
Yeah. There was a thought too that starting the season on week 0 would eventually lead to like a literal shift of the regular season up, and I'm not so sure that will happen anytime soon, but it does give you a little more flexibility during the season to maybe eventually do that if you want. Or what we think maybe more so is going to happen, right, is the conference championship game weekend turns into something else. Army-Navy sort of shifts around, which there was some news on that. We discussed last pod. We should probably follow up on that and say that Navy's athletic director came out against playing on Thanksgiving week. A pretty important one. One side completely says no on that. So that this just does give you a little flexibility. And Andy, you mentioned about preseason practice, and I would think it would have to move up. So for those in the South, it's going to be a little toasty, a little more toasty than have another week of a July practice, right? Last week of July, probably you would have.
People who grew up in Florida when 2-a-days were still allowed have no sympathy for anybody. No, you don't even do 2-a-days anymore. It's fine. But no, I do think even if they don't shift the back end of the calendar soon, having the 2 byes, because I've never understood that, especially in college football, where it's not like the NFL where you can sign a player off the street if you get weak in a position group. Having the extra bye is pretty critical in terms of recovery, and because you're seeing teams, depending on how your schedule gets made, you might have to play 9 games in a row in one of those 1 bye week years. So having the flexibility to have a second bye week is good in and of itself. Now, if they move the calendar back end, then you lose that, but you're going to have a few years of that. And the other thing about the calendar back end, it's convincing the TV guys that it's going to be okay. And I was thinking about it. Remember that great 2006 Ohio State Michigan game when it was a number 1 versus number 2, and I did monster ratings. That was before we began cheering for ratings, so it wasn't publicized at the time. But do you recall what weekend that game was played on?
Well, didn't it used to be played on the week? Was it the weekend before Thanksgiving?
Yes. Yeah. The Big Ten finished its regular season schedule on the weekend before Thanksgiving for a lot of years. So it's not like this hasn't been done before. It's not like this game has been in this spot because that's the game. That's the cherry on top, the most valuable college football game in the regular season. And obviously Alabama Auburn is the other one that weekend, but Texas and Texas A&M is a big one. And I don't think there would be a problem. I don't think you're going to lose any viewership if you move those off of Thanksgiving. But what you'd have to do is replace them with some stock on Thanksgiving weekend. And that's where your Tony Petitti idea of a play-in situation, or what the Pac-12 is doing with the flex week, if you do that in the power conferences, and you could create some fun inventory for that weekend, then you might get the networks on board.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. Now, I will say, I think the oversight committee wanted to do a lot more with the calendar and make even more drastic sort of changes. What's stopping that is a couple things. Well, you mentioned one of them with TV in general, but the uncertainty of the college football playoff format, right?
Yep.
Number 1. Number 2, Army-Navy. And number 3, the insistence, I'm glad you're sitting down for this one, Andy, the insistence from Bowles that the quarters be played on New Year's Day so they can have New Year's Day. So all this sort of hems in the calendar a little bit, where you have these hurdles or whatever you want to call them that prevent you from doing some things.
How many more of the previous generation have to retire before the people in charge of the sport look at the bowl people and just say, you guys know you don't get a vote anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. A few more, I guess. Yeah, a few more. What's funny is the bowl contracts. Now, not the New Year's Six, right? Not the six with the CFP, but the bowl contracts all expire this
Right.
year. Now there's going to have a 1 year extension. But the future of the bowls in general is a really kind of fascinating storyline right now. But the New Year's Six bowls that are part of the CFP, they are given a lot of grace, Andy.
Yeah. Well, they give a lot of money. They pay a lot of money, but
Yeah.
what what they're going to figure out eventually is they'll make the same amount of money no matter what. They can play those games on the moon. It doesn't matter. People are going to watch them. They can play those games on campus, and probably it'd be better. But that's neither here nor there right now. It's just it's so funny. But I love it when they throw all these things against the wall, and every once in a while a good idea pops in there. So the week 0 thing, it just makes me happy because the off season is so long as it is, and now I know like next year's off season will be the shortest off season in the history of the sport. It's gonna be amazing.
We expanded it on the front end. Yeah, that's true, right? We expanded it on the front end, and now we need to shrink it, for lack of a better word, on the back end, and not have the championship game on January 25th or 24th, whatever it is next year.
I don't know about you. I noticed a lot of fatigue from the audience, from the listeners, the viewers, and when they hit me up on social media, it was, hey, why are we still doing this? Like, didn't the season end already? And so I do think there's a window. I also, as much as I hate long off seasons, I do think college football having the shortest season of any major American sport does help reset the appetite really well.
Yeah.
And it keeps the audience passionate. It doesn't just drag on. Like as exciting as the NHL playoffs are, as exciting as the NBA playoffs can be, it feels like those seasons go on forever. And
yes,
I will never forget when the Bulls won their first title with Michael Jordan. Keith Olbermann was doing SportsCenter, and he was talking about it. He wraps up the highlight package. You see Michael Jordan crying with the trophy, and Olbermann says something like, "And we'll check back in on Michael Jordan when the NBA season begins next Tuesday." So can't do that in college. We don't want that in college football.
No. No. And honestly, I know we talk a lot about expanding the playoff, and I get the argument to expand and give more teams access, but I don't know, Andy, one of the great sort of cherished things about college football is that there are fewer games in general, whether it's regular season and the postseason, and so each game does have more meaning and value in magnitude. So we want to try to certainly preserve that, I guess.
Which is why you won't go to a 24-team playoff, Tony Petitti. Sorry, I had to. Look, I get why you want to do it. I get it. But there's a sweet spot, and you're in it right now with 12. You're in it. Don't mess it up. In fact, don't even go to 16, Greg Sankey. Don't do it. All right.
You go to 16. You go to 16, not to get down the road on the playoff expansion discussion, but it's hard for the Bulls now. It's really hard for the Bulls, especially at the power conference level. If you add 4 more teams, and then of course if you had 8 more teams, it's over, right? I mean, the bowl system would have to completely change or just would be eliminated.
And what will the Pop-Tarts company do?
Yeah.
What?
For their marketing and branding.
How will we know what the new flavors of Pop-Tarts are?
We've almost got, by the way, Andy, I think I said it on the show, and I appreciate the Pop-Tart Bowl folks who are avid listeners and sent all of us boxes. I had 2 giant boxes of Pop-Tarts. Each box had, I think, 6 separate flavors, and each flavor had 2 boxes. So I had 85 boxes or 85 Pop-Tarts in my home. My wife loves Pop-Tarts, so she's 2/3 of the way through them. There you go.
My son
Update.
has plowed through every box. This is a kid who weighed 135 pounds 2 years ago and currently weighs 205. So it is
Wow. What how old?
he's 16.
Yeah.
Puberty,
All
man.
right. There you
It's
go.
crazy. So
Shoot right up.
Ross, it's been a pleasure, but I know you need to get going. You are
Yep.
headed to another part of Indiana to do some fun stuff. So have fun with that. When we return, Godfrey will join us. We're going to steal an idea from international soccer and apply it to college football. And oh my God, would it be fun? We'll talk about it when we come back. Welcome back to the College Football Enquirer. Ross Dellenger has had to move off to another assignment. Stephen Godfrey joins now. And we gave Godfrey some homework last week because we got into this conversation. And Godfrey, you were the one who inspired this because we were talking about what would happen at Tennessee if Joey Aguilar lost his hearing, which he did.
Yes.
And then Tennessee had a quarterback competition. And you were positing that if Joey won, what do you do with your 5-star freshman Faison Brandon? And the idea you had was take a page from international soccer and loan him out.
Yeah,
to
whatever
a team that he's won.
what every college football fan wants to hear is that we should model ourselves after a European sport that isn't football. Well, it's a different kind of football, if you will. Yeah, it's funny because there's a cross section of college football fans who really are into soccer, and then there's also an equal measure of people who vehemently dislike soccer. So if you're in the latter, you're gonna have to bear with me here. All right. So
Wait, can I raise my hand here? I dislike watching it because it's the most boring sport in the world.
Okay.
I find the drama behind the scenes and the structural debates and all of that very interesting because I cover college football and the similarities are shocking.
Yes, I would echo that by saying I am not a hardcore soccer fan by any stretch. I have come to really love the sport and much like Andy, found a crazy amount of similarities between the off-field nonsense and our flavor of off-field nonsense. I will say that I've been a hockey fan most of my life, and so hockey kind of taught me how to watch soccer and appreciate it. So, but let's not
so much more interesting.
Let's not kid ourselves. I think both of us would prefer a Tuesday night MAC game with a combined 105 points. I mean, just
1,000,000%.
Yes.
Now, the question is, who's playing QB for those MAC teams and what Big Ten team do they belong to? Because in this model, we got some 5 stars playing there.
I don't know why I got Italian all of a sudden. Okay, so we threw this question out. I promote the show on like 3 different social media platforms. One of those is Blue Sky, and a listener, a fan of the show named CB, and I don't know, we used to shout out people's handles, but it's CB Blunt 58 if you're on Blue Sky. CB took this assignment very, very literally.
Color-coded spreadsheet.
Made
CB.
Got in the sheets, if you will, and created. He said, hey, I got us a head start on your homework. I left out Notre Dame and the 3 military academies. Thus, there are 67 P4 G5 pairings. Obviously not perfect, but I tried to group them as close as possible based on regions of the country. Now, I'm not going to read all these off, but what CB did was took my proposal in its most literal application, Andy. So what we have here are a couple decent examples of what I was suggesting. What we also have here are a couple disasters in the making, sir, because much like European soccer, this sport is rife with really weird local politics, right? Really strange dynamics.
I know where you're going with this. I know exactly where you're starting.
Honestly, there are so many. There really are so many. So I would point out that given the history between the programs, I'll throw out a lighter example just to start off with. So CB just kind of paired everybody up geographically. And some of these are, you just kind of shrug like, okay, we'll pair Toledo and Minnesota. Okay. Boston College and UMass. Okay, sure. LSU and Tulane are never going to happen. Tulane is never going to enter into a feeder program. Given the history, actually working on a little project about this right now over at Phantom Island, given the history between one UAB and the University of Alabama, sir, I don't know if that's the one that you thought I was going for. I don't think UAB is going to sign on, unless made to in the state of Alabama, to be the actual.
That might happen, actually.
Right. To be the actual literal feeder program for the one University of Alabama. So there's a lot of fun examples here. Now, some of these aren't bad, But I think I said this at the time, that I was going to actually exclude the higher end group of 5 programs. Okay, so for instance, think about the average amount of talent that Memphis has. So in this
Yes.
equation that CB created, he has Memphis paired with Tennessee. That feels different, if you will, than having one of the directional schools like, let's say, where did he put? He put Louisiana Monroe and, like South Alabama feeding to Mississippi State, or ULM feeding to Baylor. Again, he kind of had to manipulate the map here a little bit. That's not equal. That doesn't feel right. And so when I started my homework,
the thing is, if let's say Memphis and Tennessee are matched,
yeah,
if Tennessee has some freshmen that were highly recruited that it doesn't quite have space on the field for yet, or wants to get them more extensive playing time. So let's say they send a 5-star quarterback and this, high 4-star, lots of traits, but we're not really sure how they're going to express edge rusher down to Memphis.
right.
You might have made Memphis better than you, depending on how the edge rusher develops.
Correct. And so when I kicked around this idea with some friends of mine, just like sources and people who work at different levels of the industry, one, I got a response I wasn't quite ready for, which was like, I thought you were the G5 guy. How dare you? Which is like you're now turning us into the the AA Toledo Mud Hens type situation. Which after a little bit more rational conversation, we decided this isn't going to work for everybody. But those who need it in the bottom end of the group of 5, it would work tremendously. And those who are teaming with talent, let's say the top 30 or so programs, this makes a lot of sense. So unfortunately for CB, who volunteered to do this homework, I don't know if it's a 1-to-1 match necessarily. By the way, I do like the matchup of UConn and pairing with Maryland. We can call that just the Randy Edsall bond. I don't know.
I like that. Also, if I'm Maryland, I do love Jason Candle training my guys. I'm good with that. So I love the Georgia Southern Florida one, just because it brings back the memory of the two Florida guys blocking each other in the Georgia Southern game.
Yes, when Georgia Southern beat Florida without throwing a forward pass, as they talk about in Statesboro. There's a giant sort of like photo illustration in the lobby at Georgia Southern. Okay, a couple things here. If we're going to talk about this seriously, Andy, I kicked this around. I did not actually try and apply this to the current state of football, because I don't know, based on the previous segments of the show, I don't know if you can apply anything to the current state of football right now.
Yeah. The current state of football doesn't even know what it is right now.
Correct, which is why it's fun to have these conversations. So the first thing that everybody said was this has to be mandated by some form of a CBA, which is that dreaded term that feels like it's going to have to happen one day, but that everyone and their brother in a position of power, if you will, is still trying to fight. So,
but the reason enough, international soccer, no CBA.
No CBA. And I was told that's just mainly because it would be basically impossible to build and enforce an apparatus that reaches across so many different legal areas.
Different country. We're talking about different states' employment laws, different countries' employment laws.
And even bigger than something like the European Union, if you will. So it's not even one continent. You could farm a player out. By the way, you could do this in the Premiership, in which is mainly in the United Kingdom, with a MLS team here in the States. So that's one of the reasons they don't have a CBA.
And they do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Actually, I as I was sort of building this out for our recording, people were giving me examples of like players from the Premiership who are going to go on loan. So we would need a CBA actually more to kind of codify the player rights tag here. And I don't mean the rights of the player. I mean the rights to the player. Is that clear enough, Andy? Do you want to help expound on that? So this is if I'm Texas and I sign a kid, I have the rights to where he plays for a certain amount of time.
By the way, the very much G League kind of thing going on with Texas and Texas State, because you know that the NBA, they put the G League team very close to the NBA team. They do not have to drive. Like if they need to call somebody who's on a 2-way contract up, they don't have to drive. So the San Marcos to Austin, 25-minute drive up I-35.
That makes a ton of sense.
Traffic, but
no, and what's funny about that, Andy, is actually a lot of AAA teams, those who can, so like the Atlanta Braves organization, a lot of the East Coast teams have actually moved their AAA teams closer so they can do that exact thing, which is they can move players faster. So the player rights tag would have to actually be sort of like explained a little bit better. We have to walk that out, as we say in the biz. The other problem is this. there has to be opt-out benchmarks at some point, meaning that you can't park a kid forever. Something would have to trigger at a certain point. And if the kid is, for some reason, let's say, we talked about 5-star quarterbacks when I brought this up, but someone brought up to me, well, what if a 3-star tight end signs who actually overachieves? Let's say they send him to the hinterlands and he's playing at Akron or Kent State, and but his rights are held by like Michigan, Ohio State, something like that. Well, if he overachieves, he should then have some right to try to test the market after X amount of time. That was what was proposed to me, because you just made a good point. What if I have a really damn good coach at the G5, at the lower league, like a great AAA baseball coach, because those are renowned, actually. Major League Baseball teams, they pocket great managers and put them in the minors to develop pitchers or hitters or both. So if that's going on, and I suddenly have this overachieving 3-star tight end, the people I asked said, well, he should be able to go out and test the market if there's a logjam of 4- and 5-star talent at that position, and he then would have to burn out all his eligibility at the G5 school.
Oh, 100%. I think you should only be able to do it once.
Yeah.
For 1 year. Because remember, we're not, this isn't the G League. It's not two-way contract. There's not a midseason call-up. You play for the team you play for that year. You can do it 1 year, and that's it. But if I'm smart, I'm sending all my offensive line signees down there. I'm sending anybody I need who plays a developmental position down there, who's not totally ready to play at my level yet.
One of the concerns that was brought up, ironically, or somewhat, is obviously there's a big difference in academics at certain institutions. This was actually brought up, there's a pairing on here. I'll go ahead and say it out loud.
Pretend they're students? No, I know this is the thing. This is like when somebody sent me the path of AJ Swan, who started his career at Vanderbilt and bounced from school to school, and I think ended up at Appalachian State. And no offense to Appalachian State, but if my son got a scholarship, a full ride to Vanderbilt, and wound up with a degree from Appalachian State, I would be very upset with him.
Okay, so because you said that, I'll just go ahead and put this on Front Street. The two that were brought up to me immediately were Duke and Liberty and Vanderbilt and Middle Tennessee State, as a bit of a jarring difference in terms of the academic and social culture there. By the way, signing up to go to make millions of dollars as a player at Duke in the ACC and then being sent to Liberty would be a little bit of a
culture shock,
a little bit of a swing. If anything, I think Liberty and BYU might work out a partnership that might actually work out better in terms of campus culture. That's not a joke. So the next thing is that we discussed this at the top. Some of these schools don't have any willingness whatsoever to participate in this. So I picked a couple schools just because these are the ones that got brought up on the phone. Louisiana Lafayette has a great tradition. They are the Raging Cajuns. They are literally a Cajun culture. I got extended relatives through marriage there. They don't want to forfeit a full identity of their program. And in this model, they're paired with SMU. Great school, but a wildly different culture, right? And they still want to contend. Now, you can walk this out.
Are you insinuating that some of the SMU students and their parents have never flown their helicopters to the Popeyes buffet in Lafayette, which is
not a chance,
sadly.
Sir. Not a chance. Some of these are fits. We could rattle through and look at some of the fits, but a lot of these G5 programs are going to say thanks, but no thanks, because we want to we believe we're closer. We're in punching distance. As you mentioned earlier, what if you had a year accidentally where Memphis had maybe not more talent than a Tennessee roster? Because I like what Josh Heupel does on the whole. But what if they were really close? What if you had an underling program that was too close? That's why I don't think the American schools would think that this is a fit. Well, right. Most of the Americans.
But you have USF and Florida State. I would argue that last season, USF and Florida State's talent were very comparable.
Yes.
And USF might have been better.
Absolutely. Then I think that's why you could probably toss out 12, 15, maybe even 20 of these G5 schools who are saying, hey, no, we want a puncher's chance. A great example in here is that our buddy CB paired together Iowa State and Boise State. Andy, if on a blind resume test over the last 25 years, I showed you the talent on each one of those, 2004, 2005, all the way through, I think Boise State might have had more talented rosters in more years than Iowa State.
Yes, the Iowa State gets better in the Matt Campbell era for sure, but Boise State going back into the Dan Hawkins era had some pretty talented rosters.
Yes. Now, the people who are receptive to this it's that 30-30 principle that I introduced at the top of the segment. So let's talk about Ohio State. Let's talk about Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, et cetera. Now let's talk about Akron. Let's talk about Louisiana Monroe. Let's talk about the 30 or so group of 5 schools. And this is where it gets really sort of interesting. And this is really why I'm probably going to be watching a lot more North Dakota State football than I realized this year, is I want to see where they land in this a very abrupt year one. And to that end, Andy, where Sacramento State lands in this abrupt year one.
Right.
Because if you can come in and, both of those programs have had such a different kind of bluster coming in. North Dakota State basically throws their resume on the table and says, we're pretty damn ready for this. And then Sac State is citing these like kind of bunk economic analysis surveys without any of the football merit to it.
Are you suggesting that Malaysian LinkedIn post might not have been completely accurate?
I've seen weirder things cited, honestly, in arguments. I'll be very curious to see where those schools rank, because these bottom 30 schools are in desperate need of cash flow. Now, cash flow is the reason we have MACtion. No one got together in the dead cold of November in the heart of the Rust Belt of the United States and said, you know what we should do? Tuesday night football, guys. Let's go. Let's get 105 people to watch 2 football teams beat each other up at 9:00 Eastern time. No, that wasn't the reason. It was television revenue. Some of these schools, as we've discussed, are on the Mendoza line of failing to keep their D1 eligibility from a financial sense. They don't like to put that on Front Street, and a lot of these programs are basically just broke, capital B broke. I could name some, and then they deny it publicly, but I hear, when I do those anonymous coach surveys all the time, Andy, one of the things that comes up when you do the G5 is they just don't have the money. They just don't have the money. I'll give you a good example, because this is something I published in Athlon in 2020, in the spring of 25. Kennesaw State was thought to be dead on arrival in terms of their financial ability to compete. So in CB's plan here, he has Kennesaw State, which if you don't know, is essentially an Atlanta school. It's in the exurbs of Atlanta on the north side, okay? If you go up I-75 to Kennesaw, Cartersville, it's one of the big growth areas in the Atlanta metro area. On a good day, let's say it's a 90-minute drive to Athens, okay? It's not that far from a mileage standpoint. It's far if you get trapped in Atlanta traffic. This would make a ton of sense, Andy. I know Coach Mack and Kennesaw State, the Owls, were overachievers by a significant margin last season. But in the long term, what is the financial health? What does the financial prognosis look like for the Owls program? To be tethered to the Georgia brand. Andy, how many, I don't know what the total undergraduate enrollment of Kennesaw State is. How many kids do you think are walking around a Kennesaw State campus right now with UGA apparel on? What'd you say, 20%? 20, 30%?
We need to poll our friend and fellow and Kennesaw State grad, Jason Kirk at the Athletic. Yeah. But no, I would imagine a lot. It's probably like when I was because like UCF's undergone a transformation. UCF used to be like primo commuter school. It has become its own campus. Like you walk around UCF now, everybody's wearing UCF stuff. When I was in high school, if you walked around UCF's campus, everybody had Gator shirts or Seminole shirts on. Yeah. And that's probably where Kennesaw State is in its evolution right now.
Absolutely. And what UCF's been able to do, I think, probably puts them in outlier status in terms of the amount of money and population growth and expansion for one of these have-not programs into what they are.
Their plan was, athletics has actually helped them execute the plan a lot, but it was a presidential top-down entire university plan. So this could also jumpstart something like that for Kennesaw State if they could be tied in with the red and black that dominates the state.
Well, it's funny as I'll stay in that same city because I was talking to somebody about a program like, so Georgia State as a university has been around for a very long time, largely considered to be a little bit of a night school, commuter school, degree completion program. I think my mom worked on finishing her master's at Georgia State. That's not necessarily conducive to like hardcore football energy. There's been a sort of forced pairing with Georgia Southern as a rivalry. It hasn't really taken off because State really hasn't held up their end of the bargain. They moved into the old Atlanta Braves Stadium. They're paired with Georgia Tech in this scenario, which you want to talk about crosstown. We don't have call-ups.
This is the closest, I believe. They are within 2 miles of one another.
Yeah, technically they're within blocks of one another if you're including some of the city campuses of the two schools. So that makes all the sense in the world to me if I am Georgia Tech. But again, it's a willingness here to give up at least a little bit of your identity in some ways and sort of announce. Now, all right, Andy, you're the head coach at one of these schools. Are you essentially adopting a JUCO sort of structure to how you're going to build and execute a roster successfully?
Yes, because I would have done that anyway.
Okay.
And I want to prove myself to be a developer of talent, because my financial incentive for this is if let's say I'm at Georgia State and I'm affiliated with Georgia Tech, and they're going to hand me the 3-star offensive linemen that are freshmen that they would like to have ready to contribute as sophomores. And if they do that for 2-3 years and I deliver every time, I deliver them back a player who is now ready to play at their level, guess who's going to get a head coaching job at that level? Me.
This is where I'm going to push back based off of the conversations I had with people in the G5 football side and the G5 like front office side. Okay. Every one of them that I talked to in this scenario, they pose this question of like, okay, all right, you're going to win, right? You want to take these kids and play them right away, right? Your remit is now twofold. So at any of these schools that we're talking about, you're supposed to just win football games flat out. That's it. New coach at Charlotte, new coach at Akron, win football games, as hard as that might be. But Andy, what we're talking about now is you've been sent a raw freshman who's a 4 or 5-star left tackle. Okay?
Hey, see, I don't think you're getting that guy most of the time.
Well, who are you getting? Because I can still keep this going. I mean, like, you can throw me an example.
You might get the highly rated quarterback.
Okay.
Who wants to play, who doesn't want to sit.
Yeah.
The 4 or 5-star offensive tackle is playing or is a backup. He's not
on the big. You're talking about on the big team.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's on the big team. Who you're getting are the other offensive linemen that they signed. And then what they want is for you to figure out if they can play or not.
Well, so here's the problem. And this is what every coach said to me. All I have to do now at G5 School X is win football games, where I need to develop the best 5 offensive linemen to go out and beat the other G5 schools in November and win our conference. What you're asking me to do is something that's way more akin to NFL preseason football or AAA baseball, which is that any AAA, hey, I'm not going to ask you, but anyone listening, your favorite MLB team, okay, in your head, how many games did your AAA team win last year? You probably have no damn idea. And in several of those games, and especially as you trickle down into AA, a lot of games were played with the intent of development over winning. And that's what the G5 coaches pushed back on me on. They said,
it's different.
What if I have to ride or die with this guy?
You got to pitch this guy so many times. Like, it's not the same thing.
Okay, but what if I'm down here at Georgia State and you sent me this 4 or 5-star quarterback and he's eating the curb? He's terrible. But I've got a veteran. I've got my TJ Finley there who can probably go out and win us this game.
Then you play him and you tell the coach at the other school, well, you blew this one. Sign a new quarterback next year and send him to me.
What if word from upon high from that coach says, hey, you know what he needs? He needs more snaps. Push through it.
Fire me if you want.
See, but the coaches weren't as cavalier as you were about in this situation. They're like,
I have a buyout, Godfrey.
But at the G5 level, you might have a decent one, but these guys asked me flat out, am I going to be judged by doing everything tactically I can to win this football game, or am I going to be judged by developing these
and the answer is going to be yes, because if you actually want to be a successful head coach at the highest level, you got to be able to do both. So if that's what I'm saying. The incentive for me,
you're going to be a tough
coach,
boss. Yeah. All right.
The incentive for me as that coach is if I do all this, I prove that I deserve your job.
Yeah.
And which is good because your AD is going to think somebody else deserves your job soon because that's how the sport works. So when that happens, I'm ready to step in. But no, I think to take this back into the realm of the real, it doesn't necessarily have to be one G5 team slotted with one power conference team.
Right.
In reality, the way they do it in soccer is you may loan out to a bunch of different teams. You may take loans from a bunch of different teams. You also may develop. And I sent you this story, a really good story from The Athletic about Brentford, which is a Premier League team that is shockingly well run. It's basically like a Group of 5 team. It's Boise State. It's Boise State.
Yeah.
They're always better than they should be. They lose their best players because those guys go sign massive free agent deals. But they've developed this reputation of, we find guys on the cheap and turn them into successful Premier League players and then sell them. Because remember, in the soccer community, you get a transfer fee when you send that guy off. So this is like the buyouts. This is like the Brendan Sorsby buyout that they're suing over.
You're selling players. You're actually
Yes.
you're not only are you developing now to attract high-end talent or to attract talent, win, and because you and I, we've talked on the show before about there are G5 programs who are at differing volumes preaching this in recruiting right now. Mm-hmm. Come here, get developed, transfer out.
I mean, Jeff Choate at Nevada just straight up said it after Isaiah World left for Oregon. He's like, come here and in 2 or 3 years, you can be a millionaire. Like, it's not a bad pitch.
It's funny because in this story, Brentford is financially profiting off of this, and that's not an element we've seen yet. Although, again, if you had a development-minded coach, and it's funny because you think about how many people. I just talked to Bryant Vincent about something completely unrelated. The Louisiana Monroe head coach,
right?
And if you look at what he did as OC
very
at New
good,
Mexico,
like out punches his weight at Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, so he was the offensive coordinator at New Mexico. They had the highest statistical improvement in offense the one season he was there before he went to ULM. He was part of the UAB turnaround staff under Bill Clark. He said, in so many words, we were having a conversation about something else. He said, I just think there's a certain breed of us, he's talking about coaches, who are developers. We're just here for the renovation. It's just how we approach everything. We like the challenge. It's how we view the entire job. This could be a whole new breed of coach, Andy. You could have guys who, as long as the compensation is still decent, stay in these ranks and just sort of be known as a mechanic or a renovator full time. And if which you've seen
in baseball.
Yes. And at Brentford, like in your story specifically, if you drive profitability, there will be a higher demand for your service, especially if you are partnered with one of these mega schools. Yeah. All right. So what's the likelihood of this happening is probably next to none, but
it's zero. But it ties back into something Ross and I talked about with the Brendan Sorsby lawsuit. If you can make these buyouts stick, if the schools can fight for these buyouts in court, get it to become standard procedure where everybody pays the buyout when they take a player, it actually could become not a profit center, but a revenue generator, a revenue stream where you could become the garden, you could become the farmer's market that cultivates the best tomato, and everybody wants to come buy your tomatoes. So,
oh man, farmers markets, English soccer, boy, we're losing a hardcore red stripe of this audience.
I know this audience, Godfrey. We ain't talking about the farmers market in my own 3 show.
Okay.
We're not. So
you think Ari goes to a farm? Does Ari shop at a farmer's market?
Ari's wife will drag his ass to a farmer's market for sure. So
there's your bonus content. There's your bonus content.
That's exactly right. All right. I think that's a fun conversation. And also tying back to what Ross and I talked about at the beginning of the show, it's all in flux. Nobody knows what's going to happen here. Everybody's throwing ideas out there. And this is February. This is the time to do it. So feel free to laugh at us, but there are kernels of this that will exist in college football in the next 5 years. Just wait.
10 years ago, you would have laughed at us about telling you a story that Cincinnati was suing another Big 12 school for a quarterback buyout. So strange things do happen.
And that school is Texas Tech, and it paid the most money.
Lubbock's lovely. What can we say?
2026, everybody. We will talk to you on Tuesday.